Okay, welcome everybody. This is the beginning part of Navigator training and certification. We've got a lot of information that we're going to be covering, but the one thing I do want to say is that we'll make this informal, and that if you have any questions, feel free to stop me and we'll address those questions. If it's something we're going to get into more detail later on as we go forward, I'll identify that and I'll say, okay, let's just wait and see how it all fits into place. Just to give you a little bit about my background, I'm now entering my 44th year in franchising, and I never thought I'd ever be in franchising. I always wanted to be an architect. I grew up thinking that was my calling in life. I went through the University of Arizona College of Architecture, and then a number of things happened, and I ended up moving into business. I ended up moving into sales, which ultimately led me into growing companies. And when I first got involved in franchising, it was long before there was ever a legal definition of what franchising was. That didn't happen until 1979, October 21st, when the Federal Trade Commission issued its rule defining what a franchise actually is. But we always called it dealerships or distributorships back then. But I was very fortunate. I've been very blessed working with the kinds of companies that I have. One particular company at an early age, we opened up 36 offices in the first 18 months that we began an expansion program. And then I was recruited by Evelyn Wood Reading Dynamics during a time when they were really gaining a lot of traction. The Carter administration had just gone through the program, and Jody Powell, who was the press secretary, was really touting the program. And ironically, at the time, it was owned by a company that did not want to own them. But they also knew it was too soon to sell because they didn't have enough market share. So I was really brought on board to create market share, and we did it through franchising. We opened up centers all over the country. Ultimately, it was sold to Britannica. And then I moved to the second oldest and fourth largest pizza chain in the country, where I learned what not to do in franchising. And this was a company that was franchising, but they were selling products and services to the franchisees. And at the time, there was no such thing as a royalty. Well, when the Robinson-Patman Act went into effect, which is basically an antitrust law that said you can't force your distribution system participants to buy from you, you had to give them alternative methods of purchase. We did that, and the franchisees, when they found out how much they were being gouged by the company, said, we want out. And not only are we not going to pay a royalty, but we want out. So I was brought on by the chairman of the board to try to salvage it. Wasn't going to happen, and that was obvious. So I got him to put a budget together. We created a whole new pizza concept, and I sold 125 franchises relatively quickly. And the company was ultimately purchased, the retail part, by Labatt's Brewery out of Toronto, and the wholesale distribution part of it by a private equity company. Most of those guys are now the senior officials at Sonic. And then I moved into the consulting business, and I started working with more and more franchisors. And I'll tell you, we'd scratch our heads every time somebody would buy a franchise, wondering if that person was going to be a good fit or not. And the problem is that when you look at the transactional process of buying into a franchise, from the time they sign the agreement to the time they actually open their doors to the time when you can tell if they're a good fit, is generally 18 to 24 months. If it's a good fit, boy, I'll tell you, it's wonderful. If it's not a good fit, it's the worst monster you've ever seen. And I've been a franchisor. I've been a CEO of 5 different franchise companies, including Giordano's Pizza in Chicago. And when it's not a good fit, it's the worst thing that could possibly happen, because they don't like it. They don't deliver the products or services the way they should be delivered. The customers get the raw end of it, and the franchisor ultimately moves into what we refer to as the ATIONs: litigation, arbitration, and mediation. And that takes your eyes off the ball. And I'm happy to say that in the 20 plus years we've had the Navigator, none of our clients have been involved in the Asians. Yeah, there's minor situations that occur. So the Navigator was a solution. I wanted to know, can we be predictive in the recruitment, the selection, the training, and the support of franchisees? So my core company that I started in 1980 is called Franchise Architects, still in business. It was actually the then business editor of the Dallas Morning News that in 1988 said to me, well, if you ever want to get into your own business, you're still an architect of sorts. You're a franchise architect. So I liked it. We trademarked it, and we brought in our first client in January of 1980. And in real live consulting projects beginning in 1986, I assembled a mastermind of industrial, clinical, organizational, and behavioral psychologists. And in real life consulting projects for clients of franchise architects, we attempted to use every profile assessment we could get our hands on. And we did in real live projects to see if they would work. We used DISC, we used Myers-Briggs, Performance Index, Forte, you name it. And what we found out was they're all okay tools, but they weren't measuring what we wanted to. They weren't measuring whether or not somebody could execute a particular business model. What they generally were measuring was personality, and we found it wasn't about personality. And then we also made a realization that the construction of these assessments was incorrect for what we want in the franchising space. So we went back to the drawing board and we developed the Franchise Navigator. We launched it, excuse me, after about 6 years of testing it to see if it would work. You cannot come out with these assessments and expect to have results within a 2-year, 3-year period. It's not enough time to have any type of validity at all. So we wanted to validate it before we turned the faucet on. I'm proud to say that the first 2 projects that we signed up were huge successes. The first was Great Clips for Hair, and they were selling lots of franchises to the wrong profile. And we documented the entire process. We showed them that they're going after the wrong people. We identified for them who the right person was. And once we created the profile, they hired us to create the websites, the marketing material, all of the email campaigns, because then it became profile-based. Well, I can tell you 2 weeks ago at the International Franchise Association's convention, Rhoda Olson, who's the president and CEO, walked by me, and I yelled out her name, and we chit-chatted, and she said to me, she said, you know, Great Clips for Hair would not be where it is today without the Navigator. Well, I assure you we're going to follow up, and we're going to get that on video. The second project was Sears. And it was really a very interesting project because Sears, we all remember the Sears catalog stores. And that's how they conducted business. You could buy anything you wanted to out of a catalog store. Houses, cars, toilet paper, it didn't matter. Well, at one point, Sears made the strategic decision to get out of the catalog business. But in the process, over the years, they had developed catalog stores. And they dotted the landscape of America, because they're America's brand, with these catalog stores. So when they decided to get out of the catalog business, they still wanted to maintain a presence out in the secondary and the tertiary markets where, you know, it really resonated with the consumer. They were and are America's brand. So they created a small retail footprint that today is branded the Hometown Stores. And they took 63 managers out of the catalog business, literally like a chess piece, picked them up and dropped them down as owner-operators in a sales environment. And if you can imagine the real estate division for Sears Holdings, they knew exactly where these locations should go. They knew the traffic counts, the competition, the demographics, the cycle. They had that nailed. But what happened was they quickly identified that stores they thought were going to do well didn't. Stores they didn't think were going to do well did. Well, we were brought in by Deloitte, who is their auditors, and we had a relationship with Deloitte. And Deloitte called me up. I remember Jim Flaherty called me up. He says, well, here's the issue. Can you fix it? I said, I don't know. So we went in there, and we gave the 63 managers the Navigator. And at that time, it was a paper and pencil tool. It was not automated or web-based. So we had to score everything manually. But what we were able to do was identify the reason why some of the stores were doing well was because of the people, not the demographics, the psychographics, the traffic counts, competition, price points. And the ones that weren't doing well also was because of people. Well, I can honestly tell you that was 22 years ago, and Sears continues today to use the Navigator. They're now up around 1,300 locations. That division's doing about $2 billion in revenues, and Sears Holdings spun off their entrepreneurial division, which included the hometown stores, the outlet stores, and the home appliance stores. And when they did, they had their analysts revalidate the Navigator profile. So it worked then, and it still works today. So our message is that there's a better way to assist candidates in finding the right franchise, and on the franchisor side, there's a better way to find the right franchisee. So what the Navigator is doing is it's connecting the dots. It's finding that needle in the haystack that so many people just couldn't find. But we've nailed it. But what's happened is that the whole process of what we've done in franchising is really cutting edge. And we now say franchising is full of BS. We've turned this into a predictable science. I don't know if any of you saw, but earlier this week, no, it was actually over the weekend, I posted on LinkedIn that it's no longer B2B. It's no longer B2C, business to business, business to consumer. It's H to H. It's human to human. And that you're going to find the Navigator connects the dots in terms of how to communicate with people, understanding who they are, why they do what they do. Because I have to tell you, for many years, I was the same way. I'd scratch my head wondering why somebody did what they did, why they made decisions the way they do. And now that I understand the Navigator, I understand exactly why. And it actually becomes predictive when you know what their profile is. So the whole process has become a behavioral mapping process. And it's really very different. And what we are going to discuss is why the Navigator is different. Not just the why, but the how. How is it that the Navigator is different than all these others? But also, it's grown. It's evolved. Yeah, we have the Franchise Navigator because that was the early solution we were looking for. We now have Business Navigator, which helps non-franchised businesses get the right people on their bus, and we're starting to rack up the success stories with it. We have the Entrepreneur Navigator. So if somebody's thinking about owning their own business and they really don't know what kind, the Entrepreneur Navigator will help them. It'll identify whether or not they've got the right stuff to own their own business, and then we can actually move into what specific types of businesses. So Jim, for IBA, we've developed the Connect Me for franchise candidates, but in a lot of cases, just because of who who the company is, you're going to deal with people that aren't interested in franchising, or people that are way too entrepreneurial for franchising. And we have the Sales Navigator, the Franchise Sales Navigator, which is very interesting because I sent this out to 40 of our clients, and would you believe 60% of the franchise sales people had a profile, their own individual profile, that was incongruent with the profile that the brand is looking for. And we're getting ready to launch the Vocation Navigator. 72% of all kids that graduate college today aren't employed in the area of what their focus in education is because they never had somebody showing them what kind of vocation, what they should be looking for in terms of their particular career. The Vocation Navigator does it. So the agenda is subsequent to today's call, we'll be distributing to you workbooks. And it's a whole series of workbooks that walk you through the process of understanding the Navigator. It's accompanied by a whole library of videos and study guides. Plan on about 3 hours. It's probably going to run a little more than 3 hours. And during this time, we're going to be discussing a lot of things, including the overview of the Navigator, understanding the Navigator profiles, then the whole process of recruitment, the brokerage, the coaching, so that more sales can take place. We'll also discuss how the Connect Me works. And then one of the things that Rhoda Olson said to me back in 1998, she said, and she has a master's degree in psychology, she said, what you want to be able to do is track how each profile responds during various stages of the vetting process. Well, we've done that. And with a high degree of predictability, we can walk you through this process so that you'll know how candidates, based on their profile, respond and how to communicate with them, even the frequency of communication. Because we all know that some people need a lot of hand-holdy, touchy, feely kind of relationship, where others give them the information. Give it to me, I'll process it, I want it on my own terms, and then I'll get back to you. We'll also share with you the white-labeled surveys that we've created for you, and then how to deliver and access the survey results using your own secure control panel. It's username and password protected. Now, along with that, we have 2 ebooks that have been published. Franchising is Full of BS. Jim, I'm not sure if IBA is a member or not, but the International Franchise Association, in their February edition of Franchising World, on page 50, published a real short, condensed 2-page version of Franchising is Full of BS. That was given out to every attendee.
Yeah, what edition was that? I get Franchising World. What edition was that?
February, the one that's current right now with Shelley's son on the cover.
Okay, yeah. I just saw that one.
Yep, so if you go to page 50, you'll see the article. And then Entrepreneurship is Full of BS. Now, in addition to this, I can share with you with a lot of pride, Professor Frank Hoy, who's on our advisory board, very interesting fellow. I met Frank 25, 30 years ago when he was Dean of the Business College at the University of Texas, El Paso. Frank's always had an interest in entrepreneurship and franchising, and he's become very prominent in the world of academia. And Frank is now one of the senior professors at the Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Worcester, Massachusetts. He's one of 3 hand-picked college professors to rewrite the 60th edition of Small Business Management, which is one of the premier college textbooks. Frank and I have written a series of research papers on the impact of behavioral sciences in business and franchising. We submitted it to 2 different associations, the American Society of Behavioral and Social Sciences and the American Association of Behavioral Sciences in Business. Both of these trade associations accepted our paper, invited us to speak and make presentations at their annual conventions. We did the first one 2 weeks ago, which serendipitously was at the same time as the IFA convention in Las Vegas. I go back end of March back to Vegas for the second one, and that document, along with case studies, will be published in the Journal of Behavioral Sciences. So we're making great strides. One thing I can't emphasize enough is that it's a real serious business. It's a real serious process. And we have people out there that are creating assessments left and right, trying to play in the space. And they're doing more injustice than they are justice. We'll get into that in a few minutes. But we always want to be the premier. When they go low, we go high. And we're doing that. So there's basically two kinds of assessments. And I have to tell you, I was blessed. This was not really by my design. My mastermind said this is the way it should be set up. So there's a normative assessment, and there's what's called ipsative assessments. What the normative assessments, which is what the Navigator is, you've gone through it. It's 54 questions, 5 multiple choice answers. And the answers is, by clicking on the radio button, is the word or the phrase or the question is either not like me at all or a lot like me. And you have the continuum in between that. That's called the normative assessment. And there's a lot of research that's being done by third-party researchers talking about the positives and the negatives of both normative and ipsative assessments. The key to ipsative is that it's a forced choice assessment, meaning you're given a question. And once you've got that question, you're given 4 choices. And in those 4 choices, what the design is that you either drag and sort, drag and drop, or number based upon what the answers are. Well, first of all, what if none of these resonate? What if none of these make sense for the person taking the survey? They have to choose one of them in order to proceed. You can't click on next unless you've answered, dragged, and dropped in the right order. That means it's dirty data. It's not accurate. And the second thing that the researchers have shown us is that when it's a forced choice assessment, it's okay one-on-one personal development, but what you cannot do, because it's so individualized to the survey participant, is you cannot compare that one apples to apples to another, and then to another, and then to another, and then to another, which means you can't build a population. And in that population, you can't identify who the high performers are, the mid performers, and the poor performers the way we can with the normative assessment. That's very significant, because you'll find as we go through this that we create scientifically sound high performer profiles for our clients. And in fact, Professor Robert St. Louis, who's a 46-year, tenured professor at Arizona State University, he went through 11 of our projects, went through all of the data collection, and came back and said that because of the way we do this, we have between a 90 and a 95% probability of being able to identify future high performers. Well, we can take that process and apply it to a whole spectrum, and we do, to existing entrepreneurs and business owners so that we can benchmark new candidates coming in. We certainly do it for franchise owners and owner candidates, sales professionals. We do it with life coaches. We've even done it with receptionists, back office technicians, office managers, general managers, retail, food service, sales associates. It doesn't matter. We've even done it with business brokers, Jim, and can identify what differentiates the high performers from the mid performers. It's really a very interesting process. So we've taken the whole concept of behavioral sciences and progressed it light years ahead. Okay, so come on. Okay, here we go. So we've got 20 plus years in the franchising space. And again, as I mentioned before, what the others are measuring is personality. And what we concluded is it's not about personality. It's about values. And values is the basis for everybody for making decisions, performing activities. You can't ask somebody to do something that's incongruent with their value system. So what we've been able to do is nail that value system. Franchise architects would just turn 38, I believe. So we've got a lot of experience in the franchise space. But the one thing the clients will all tell us, they all validate this, we help increase performance. Performance of the existing franchisees, performance of the new candidates. We help them select better candidates with a high degree of accuracy. And now we've introduced another game changer, which is Navigator Certified Life Coaching. And Rick and Joe that are on the phone represent that division. And what we've concluded is this, is that when a franchisor brings on a franchisee, they basically draw a line right down the middle of that individual. One side deals with the procedural, the processes, the tactical aspects of executing that business model, the manuals, the training programs. Does that ensure success? No. What that attempts to secure is uniformity and consistency in how the products or services are delivered to the end user for usage or consumption. They're totally silent about the other side of that individual. What's taking place between their ears? Because there may be old habits, patterns, paradigms, whatever it might be, that blocks success. And the coaches are successful in getting in and attempting to remove those blockages so that they have better interpersonal skills and relationships with their employees, with themselves, and they can balance all of the aspects of business, life, the personal issues, the spiritual issues, and be a better person. It's a game changer. And we're focusing in on that. And we're going to have a lot of articles coming out about the life coaching. So we've got 20 plus years, and one of the things that the clients tell us is that they experience between 18 and 38% increases in same-store sales. One client, which is Window Genie out of Cincinnati, says that when he selects franchisees that fit the Navigator profile, they will generate $120,000 a year in sales more than the previous franchisees that he brought in. And it's all because of attracting and filtering the right candidates that resemble the high performers. And then we move on, as I explained, with Great Clips or with Potbelly, where because once we know the profile, we know who they are, where they are, the colors to use, the words to use, the tonality, and the frequency of the contact, and then how to find these candidates. So we really get involved in all aspects of the recruitment and the training program with our clients. So the clients love it. And to be honest with you, the relationship we have with our clients is we do charge a fee to do the benchmarking to create the profiles, but on an ongoing basis, we have no contract with them. They use the surveys, and we invoice them at the end of the month for previous month's surveys, and they pay us. Sears, as I mentioned, has no contract, and we know that they love using it. Regis just launched a new brand called Smart Style. They've done 52 surveys since February 1. It's 52 surveys. And I know that when I invoice them, we'll get our ACH within a matter of days. So here's one of the paradigms to think about. And I love doing this as a test. I go up to CEOs all the time. I meet them all the time. And I say, okay, you've got 50 franchisees, you've got 150, you've got 500 franchisees. What percentage of them do you think are high performers, mid performers, and poor performers? Well, you know what they say? It's like robotic. They all say, oh, it's a third, a third, a third. Well, I can tell you that's not true. It's a myth. But let's go back to that. If it was a third, a third, a third, that means 2/3 of their franchisee population are underperformers. But we know that's not true. So these are real live statistics. I mean, if I told you what companies that this is for, you'd know. This particular company offers a single unit and a multi-unit. 17% of their population, the existing franchisees, are high performers. 66 are mid, 17 are poor. It's 83% are underperformers. And look at the multi-unit. It's a little better, but not really. And this is a service business, mid-size, which means they have over 250 locations. 34% are high performers, 62% are mid, and 4% are poor. Can you imagine what happens to a company where we go in and we can show them how to turn mid-performers into high performers? The return on investment is incredible. That's why they love us, because we cause change to occur. And we've done it with a lot of companies. So we've got the track record, we've got the experiences, we've got the process. And now we're sharing it with everybody so that everybody can participate in this. And Jim, this is a wonderful opportunity for you to be able to connect with your candidates and then have the insight from Connect Me in terms of what kind of brand they're best suited for. So we've actually, you know, I say this all the time, growing a business is all about building the brand with the right people. It's all about getting the right people on the bus. And if you've watched our videos, that's the emphasis, getting the right people on your bus. It's no longer about points on the board. What it is, it's about points on the board with the right people. Here's how we do it. So inside the Navigator, as we began to look at how do we quantify values, what happened was, as is true with a lot of the other profiles, is that we divided into quadrants. So there's 4 different profiles. There isn't any one of these profiles that's more important than the other. So think about the value system as being a 4-cylinder engine. They all need to be working harmoniously with each other, yet each one of them is a valuable ingredient to the entire recipe. So the accomplisher deals with leadership and drive. And we can tell between 0 and 100% if somebody's got the drive, or if they've got so much drive, they're way too entrepreneurial to be part of a franchise. I had one of my clients call me up yesterday and say, okay, I need some help. This guy's a 92% accomplisher. Right off the bat, when they're in the 90 percentile, it's excessive, it's extreme. And I said, this person is not going to follow directions. The influencer is the sales, the communication. It's the ability, their value system is they pride themselves on their ability to influence somebody's mind, somebody's decision-making process, somebody's buying pattern. So it is the sales and the marketing part of the value system. We'll get into what happens at the extremes, the low extreme and the high extreme, in a minute. The associator, on the other hand, is very different than the influencer and very different than the accomplisher. The associator is more the interpersonal relationships. It's that need to belong, that need to associate with something, a group, whatever it might be. And the associators, when somebody scores pretty good in the associator, good meaning between the mid-70s and the high 80s, these are the people that are very loyal. And you see it in sports. You know, I spent 37 winters in Chicago. And you could go to a Cubs game, you know, prior to last year when they won it all, and they would put 41,000 people in the seats. And a good portion of them were wearing Cub blue. You know, they're waving the banners, waving the flags, they're wearing the hats, they got the jackets and the jerseys, and up. That's because Chicago is an associator city, and the Cubs are an associator team. And the people that they draw, the fans, are also high associators. So these are the people that, depending upon their scores, are going to be involved in the church, the synagogue, the active groups, and all sorts of things because they like to be a part of. And it's also true in franchising. Now, the contributor is very different. The contributor is more selfless, where the influencer is selfish. The world revolves around the influencer when their scores get pretty high. They actually, you can identify narcissism. And I'll leave it at that. I won't go into anything dealing with the political affairs. The contributor is selfless. What can I do to enrich the lives of the people that I come in contact with? Somebody who's a high contributor sometimes gravitates toward business, but in most cases, they're going to gravitate toward the sciences, medical sciences, and they'll become doctors and nurses, social sciences, social workers, that kind of thing where it's selfless. So everybody has all four profiles. They're all equally as important, but here's the key. Everybody has a dominant. And that dominant is what drives that individual. The other three are like the supporting cast in a play. They are the subordinate profiles. They've got to be taken into consideration because they're as important, but the dominant is the one that's really going to force them and show you how and why they do what they do. So when we're determining profiles, what the Navigator really is, it's looking at those four profiles and it's identifying internally what skills they're best at. And there's really only 3 skills in any business. Doesn't matter what industry. There's sales and marketing skills, the ability to meet, greet, and exceed the customer's expectations, the ability to go out and drive the business. And then there's the business administration and the HR management skills, which is the ability to recruit, manage, and motivate teams of people. Salespeople are generally not good at team building. Team builders are generally not good at sales and marketing. And then you have the product or the technical skills, whatever it is that they're delivering to the end user for usage or consumption, which is oftentimes the easiest of the skills to transfer to somebody, because that is something that can be taught. So one of the things that we always say is that when you're talking to somebody that's a potential franchise candidate, they're not going to be good at all 3. They're not. People who are good at all 3 don't look at franchises. They look at doing it on their own. Now, just a little bit of history. When franchising first evolved and first started, it started in reverse. It started as a product or a technical business opportunity, where in the salon business, they would sell franchises to the stylists. Well, the stylists could cut the hair, but they couldn't manage people and they couldn't sell. And the same thing was true in automobile aftermarket. In the automobile aftermarket, they'd sell the franchises to the mechanics, but they couldn't build teams and recruit people, and they certainly couldn't sell. So one of the things that we do with our clients and we do with candidates is identify which one is their strength. And you'll see through the Navigator, it's pretty easy to figure out. Because what we do then is we look at franchises that will support them in the other 2. But here's the key, and I'll talk about this a lot in terms of the values. What are values? Values are beliefs that an individual has and has an emotional vested interest in. So think of it this way. We're all wired differently, but yet one thing we all have in common is a value system. And it's generally instilled upon us by our parents. They instill upon us their value system. But then it's affected. It's affected by our personal lives, our professional lives. It's somewhat fluid. It can be modified, but the basic core of the value system will not change. And what happens is that when a decision has to be made or activities need to be performed, whether we realize it or not, whether we accept it or not, an individual takes that activity, decision, whatever, and goes into their value system. They go deep into their value system. They try to anchor it towards something that they've experienced in the past, positive or negative. And then once they do that, it comes back out. Now, all of that happens in nanoseconds. You can see, if you ask somebody a question, you can see their eyes. You can tell from the eye movement and NLP that they're processing information, but it happens so fast. But when that comes back out, it comes back out in decisions or behavior that's congruent to the value system. And that's why I say you can't ask somebody to do something, make a decision, perform an activity when it's incongruent with their value system. So the training program is going to go into how to understand values, how to communicate with them, how to understand the profiles and the various profile combinations because somebody could be a dominant accomplisher, associator, influencer, contributor, or they might be a dominant associator, contributor, influencer, whatever it might be. And one of the things we're going to be providing you is an entire library of profile combination reports. At the conclusion of each of those reports are businesses best suited for that particular profile combination. So that, in conjunction with the Connect Me and the insights in terms of the kind of business model they connect with and it will resonate with, gives you great insight into how to work with these people. Now, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time today on these profiles. That's going to come later, and we're going to take each of these profiles and we're going to go into what it means, how it impacts them, and what each of these profiles has in terms of their own fear factor. Because a lot of the communication comes from being able to break down fears. Once we know what their fear is and we can overcome it, then we can move forward in the relationship. But at about 60,000 feet, the accomplisher is a big picture person. They see everything that's taking place. They can multitask. They generally have strong business skills, even if they've not been educated or trained. But what they do have is a strong drive for accomplishment. And as we go through the training program, we'll show you that on the continuum from 0 to 100%, where each aspect of the accomplisher takes effect. They can manage teams of people, and they've got long-term goals. So a lot of the people that are dominant accomplishers, while they might look at franchises, they have a much bigger picture that they're looking at. So one of the things you want to talk to them about is, okay, what's your exit strategy? What's next? And when you do that, when you ask that kind of question, they're going to give you that critical path. Okay, I'm going to start here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. But this is where I ultimately want to be. Then you can start matching their needs with how the businesses can fulfill those needs. The influencer, on the other hand, cannot multitask. They've got strong sales skills. But one thing, if it's a dominant influencer, is it's instant gratification. So, and that means they need a lot of accolades. So if you've ever been in a situation where you've congratulated somebody on doing a great job, and they kind of look at you, they cock their head a little bit, cup their hand to their ear and say, "What did you just say?" It's not that they didn't hear you. They heard you loud and clear. Just they need it over and over and over again. When somebody has a high dominant influence as part of their profile, much higher risk takers. They'll make decisions so fast it'll blow you away. May not be accurate, but they like making decisions because they have a very short attention span. And to them, there is no ceiling. The world is their oyster. They can do anything. They can accomplish it, and boy, I can do it better than everybody else. And then you have the associator, which is totally different than the first two. Very broad focus, but they cannot multitask. They tend to do things digitally, one thing at a time. But they've got a very strong need to belong. They work with families, they work with friends, and they do need a lot of attention. Don't give them accolades. That's going to embarrass them, and it's not their value system. They like something that's routine, not a lot of risk, and they are strong team players. So the associator deals with the interpersonal attributes of an individual. And then we have the contributor, which is very caring, as I said. And by the way, I will continue to repeat things over and over again because the marketing specialists have proven we need to hear something at least 17 times before it really resonates. That's why on television you see these commercials over and over and over and over again. Is they do that on purpose because you need to see it. Once you begin to see it and you begin to understand it, then you anticipate it. And when you anticipate it, it becomes part of your routine. They don't like accolades either. They want something that's steady, loves to enrich others, and will only be involved with something that's beneficial. By the way, when somebody scores in the 90 percentile of the contributor, this is when it becomes an extreme. And not only do they surpass the sciences, now they get into Greenpeace. They get into Save the Whales, Save the Planet, and become tree huggers. Well, then there's a place for them in life. So again, we're going to spend a lot of time. We've got workbooks and videos for each of the 4 profiles. And one of the next part of the training program that we're going to cover is understanding the profile combinations. But it's this kind of recipe that we want to go after when we do the benchmarking. So the way that we're able to create the high performer profile for our clients is because of 2 things. One, the normative assessment, which allows us to build a population. And that's key. And then we do a pretty extensive benchmarking and data collection. So this is actually the real live statistics for Window Genie. This happens to be which is now up to, I think, 420 locations. They won't bring anybody in, by the way, unless they fit the Navigator profile. So we have everybody that's current take the Navigator. No benchmarks. All we want at this point are the raw scores for each of the 4 profiles. And then what we do, which is very different than anybody else, is we create a series of metrics so that they can score, grade, or rank the franchisee's performance. And by the way, we do this for franchisees, we do this for employees, we do it for managers, general managers, any place we can build a population. By the way, the statisticians say that population needs to be close to 100. So what we tend to do is if a company only has 50 locations, but we know that business model, and that business model has other companies that are similar business models, we can lump them together. So what we do is we create these categories using a company's own internal KPIs, key performance indicators. How do they measure success? So it could be sales, could be compliance to the business model, could be teamwork. Some companies have speed to the market. Some companies like Which had rank your franchisees based on their Vibe program, which is their loyalty program, which is centralized so they can see the level of activity that's taking place inside the stores. And we have them score them a 1, 2, or a 3. We also identify the length of time they've been in the system, because early adapters and early stage franchisees tend to perform differently than those that have been in the system for quite some time. So we even categorize it that way. We even categorize it based on urban or suburban franchisees because it's very different. The profile of a urban franchisee is somebody who's got to deal with a lot of competition within close proximity, and the profile of a franchisee out in a secondary or tertiary market is more relationship building. With Jamba Juice, we're even doing East Coast and West Coast. The West Coast franchisees were the early adapters. The East Coast franchisees are buying in based on the business model and the metrics of the business model. So we can break it down, slice and dice it however we want to. But basically what happens is we take all of this data and we go through a statistical analysis. If you're technically oriented, it starts with CART, classification and regression tree analysis. But really what we want is we want to create a segmentation model. And that segmentation model is going to help us identify what differentiates the high performers from the mid performers and the poor performers. And we can identify with the Navigator scores the minimum and the maximum scores on that 0 to 100% continuum where the high performers fall. We then go back into the scorecard and we begin to identify, even with their high performers, the green means they're in the sweet spot, and this is the sweet spot right here. These are their recommended scores. The green represents the sweet spot. Orange represents close, 2 percentage points above or below, which, by the way, through training, education, and coaching, we can change behavior 2 percentage points, but we can't change it when it's 3, 4, 5, 6 percentage points. But what happens is that as you go down, such as what we can see here in Which, as you go down, guess what? It turns to red. So these are people that, if they had a mulligan, if they had a do-over, they probably wouldn't bring these people into the system in the first place. Excuse me. And now that we know the high performer profile, this is what sets the metrics for selection. So it's scientific. Nobody else does it the way we do it. And as a result, it's incredibly effective. So when somebody goes through the Navigator, and we know what the scores are, and we can tell. So in this particular case, and by the way, high score does not win. Low score does not win. It's moderate. And also when we see peaks and valleys, that's not a good sign. That means there's an imbalance in that particular individual. So in this case, they're an 82% associator. And then the subordinates are the contributor, the accomplisher, and look, way down below is the influencer. So this person's just not into sales and marketing at all. If they are in a sales position, because of the associator, contributor, and accomplisher, they're going to be selling more through education. They're educators, not salespeople. So we know the dominant, we know the subordinates, and the profile combination. And we're able to go into the computer system, and the way in which the architecture of the Navigator has been designed, we can go in and we can input numbers that then appear as the horizontal grid marks. And we do it for all 4 profiles. We do it for single unit. We do it for multi-unit. We can do it for general managers, assistant managers, whatever it might be. And then the good news is that when somebody distributes the link for the Navigator assessment to a candidate, it takes less than 10 minutes. It's generally around 8 or 9 minutes to complete. From the minute they click on submit, we're able to see the results instantly. So this way, from a sales and marketing standpoint, 2 things occur. 1, you can identify the strengths and the weaknesses of the individual instantly. And where they're the weakest, so let's say you've got somebody that is interested in owning a franchise, but they're nowhere near the recommended scores. We don't just say to them, no, you shouldn't consider this one at all. We go through a process where perhaps you should consider bringing a partner. And that partner would hopefully have strengths where one has weaknesses. Inside the Navigator control panel, you have the ability to merge and combine up to 6 profiles together. That's how we're able to do the team building exercises with our clients at the franchisor level, and that's how you're able to determine whether or not groups of people, husband and wife combinations, partnerships, whatever, are going to work with that particular brand. But the key is that we've established scientific metrics of what differentiates the high performers from the mid performers and the poor performers. So the key from this point forward with the franchisors, don't bring anybody in that resembles the poor performers. So we automatically slash that category. Now we've got high performers and the mid performers. And what happens is, because they're using the Navigator, they end up with a much higher share of high performers than they do mid performers. It's really very interesting. We then affect the attraction strategy so that they're attracting the right profile. These people, these candidates, are screened against the profile, and the process of selection is you only really want to bring in candidates that resemble your profile. That's the key to success. And for the franchisors, the results are delivered to them just like a traffic light: green light, yellow light, red light. The green light comes out as high potential, the yellow light comes out as acceptable potential, and the red light comes out as careful potential. We used to call it caution. Now we call it careful. So when we talk about the recruitment pipeline for franchisors, now the whole process is putting the right people into the funnel. If they have an interest, if they fit or don't fit, they then become a candidate and they then are selected. So we streamline the entire process for the franchisors, and from the broker side, we streamline this entire process so that you can slot them in the right category. That's how and why we call it the behavioral mapping. But then, honestly, 12 years ago, Ace Hardware came back to us, and after using the Navigator for a few years, and they said, wow, this is great. We're learning more about our people than we ever dreamt we ever would, but can we go deeper? Can we go deeper into their DNA so that we can even be more predictive in how we deal with them? So they partially funded what we call the personal development chart, and it all becomes part of the behavioral mapping. And what it does is it takes the metrics of the sweet spot, the recommended scores, the individual scores of the survey participant. The algorithm then drills down into 9 categories and rates these people, grades these people in entrepreneurship, leadership, salesmanship, customer service, operational efficiency, accounting acumen, people development, delegation, and time management. So it goes down the 9 categories across the 4 profiles, identifies if it's a strength or a weakness, and we even offer coaching and training recommendations in order to improve performance. Then when our coaches are brought in to coach the franchisees, they see the map. They don't have to spend time learning, figuring out, asking questions. They can go to work coaching instantly. So the way in which it's delivered, most of you have seen this. This is what the report looks like. It explains what the Navigator is, the profile combination, and then it goes into the 9 categories across the 4 profiles, identifies if it's a strength or a weakness in each of these categories, and it offers the coaching and the training recommendations. So the good news is you don't have to become a behavioral psychologist. We do it for you. And the way in which you can tell instantly is by what we've trademarked as the personal source code. And what it does is it basically takes an order of ranking and shows you which is the percentages in order from the dominant all the way to the subordinates. So it shows you who your employees are, who your candidates are, and shares with you that you're dealing with the whole person. This is how we go about doing the life coaching, where the left side is the procedural, the tactical process. The right side is the thinking, the patterns, and the habits, because this is what affects success. So that's the overview. Now we're going to get into recruitment. We'll get into understanding the Navigator profiles, franchisee candidate evolution, how they respond, how they think as they go through the sales process, and how to close more sales and how to integrate it. So at this point, what we can do is take a little break, if you'd like. Are there any questions?
You said earlier, Craig, about newer franchisees may show differently than franchisees that have been in the system for a while. So how does that work? Are you working with the older franchisees to try to make some changes, or how does that work?
Well, we spend a lot of time coaching the operations training and field support personnel. And one of the things that we do when we do the level 1 training for a franchisor is we've actually created a FBC, a Franchise Business Consultants profile. So we have the FBCs take the Navigator. We know their profile. And then what we do is we take randomly some of the franchisees that are in their particular territory, and we have their Navigator profiles. And what we do is a whole series of role playing. You know, one of the faults in franchising is people try to come up with a one-size-fits-all solution. It's never going to happen. You know, that's sort of like saying that all franchisees are like walking into the vegetable section of the grocery store and they're only onions or they're only potatoes. It's not true. So what we do is we do a lot of role playing so that the franchise business consultant can identify the strengths and the weaknesses, the dominant and the subordinates of the franchisees in their territory and how best to communicate with them. The second thing that we do, and this is a game changer in franchising, is that when you go through a training program for franchise sales, it's transactional. It's here's the first step, here's the second step, here's the third step, all the way through to the 25th step, and you hope at the tail end they come out and they buy something. Well, the franchise process, the decision-making process on the part of the candidate is not transactional. They really don't care. They don't know what the vetting process is. And that's not what they're looking for. The associators might, because they like the routine. Okay, you're going to call them at 4 o'clock on Tuesday? Call them at 4 o'clock on Tuesday. They're waiting for your call. So the vetting process, and I've had this conversation with IFPG and FBA and all of the other broker groups, and they stay in their own space. And it is transactional. That's what they certify franchise salespeople on, is the transactional process. But that being said, most franchise salespeople push information on the candidates. They push information. How great our franchise is. How great this franchise is. How great. But it's pushing information at them. And you'll see in the next presentation, have you ever done a presentation? You thought it was great. You thought it was remarkable, only to never hear from the candidate again? And it's because they're so guilty of pushing the information as opposed to eliciting from the candidate what their needs are, what their value system is, how they make decisions, what information they have to have, and in what order to make those decisions. That's the game changer. That's why most of our franchise clients sell more deals and close more deals, because it's more relationship building, and instead of pushing information, it's eliciting and knowing in advance on a predictive basis how to communicate with these people. High dominant accomplishers don't want the daily calls. They don't want to call it Tuesday at 4 o'clock. Give them the information. They are going to go through it on their own terms and excuse me, and then they'll get back to you. Okay, let me put this on pause for a second. Okay, so the question is that you've got a candidate and they've come to you and they appear to be infatuated with a particular business model or a particular industry, and then you discover via the Navigator that maybe that's not a good fit for them. How do you handle that? Would you say that's accurate for your question?
Yes.
Okay, great. Here's the way we handle it, and here's the way we recommend you handle it. And that is, follow your passion, but take your brain with you. And what scientists have proven is that decisions should be made by the heart and the brain in tandem as a team. And when it's out of alignment, it's not a good decision. So if they come to you and they've got passion and that heart's beating and they're saying, wow, this is great, this is what I want to be, but intellectually they may not be able to execute the business model, not a good decision. Some cases it's reverse, where they come to you and they say intellectually, yeah, I understand the metrics, I understand the numbers, but there's no passion, not a good decision. Got to have both. So what we say to the candidates, and it's even in the introduction when they take the Connect Me, is keep an open mind. Because what we're going to show you is business opportunities and franchises that you might not have thought about. And you can't come in with a closed mind. Keep an open mind, because we're going to show you business models that you might not have thought about, but are in reality a good fit for you. Now, I can share with you horror stories from the franchisors where they've got franchisees that are so passionate. They love it. They love the products. They love the services. That's why one of the issues with putting at the cash register of any particular business franchises available is you've got people that are passionate about the business, but they may not have what it takes to operate that business, to execute the business model. So we pre-frame it. We say, keep an open mind, because we're going to show you stuff. We're going to show you franchises that you might not have thought about. Now, if somebody is just so hell-bent on a particular model, let's say they want ice cream. Well, if they're not the right profile, then what we do is we shift them towards hiring a manager who more closely resembles that profile, because they're not going to do well. So we're not interested in just selling. We're interested in, it's like puzzle pieces, making sure that it fits. Make sense?
Yes, that does. And I guess the other question that I would have, sure that they may be buying a business that is a good fit for them. We all know it has a lot to do with the U factor. And people get sidetracked or tracked pretty easily. And how do you make sure that they don't feel like they're guaranteed success because they buy this business and all of a sudden they're going to come back?
Well, there is no guarantee. And as we said earlier, what we have found is the tactical, the procedural, the processes of learning the business model does not affect success. That only affects uniformity and consistency. That what's between their ears. And I don't have any problem saying to people, a lot of the brokers that are high income producers that use the Navigator don't have any problem saying to somebody, listen, I can present this business model to you, and it might be a good fit, but you may have habits, patterns, and behavior that would block your success. So as you look outside for a business opportunity in a franchise, look at inside your own capabilities. And then the Navigator and the behavioral mapping process is what shows scientifically where their strengths and where their weaknesses are. You can't fool the Navigator. You can't, when you go through it, you cannot anticipate how your answer and your response is going to affect the results. It's impossible, because the way in which it's constructed is there's questions that reinforce the others or neutralize the others. You can't do it. The only way you can do it is if you go down each of the sections of the questions and click on all fives, all fours, all threes, all twos, all ones. But the truth is, we know what those scores are, and we advise the franchisor. We had one candidate for one company last week that scored in the 90s all the way across. I knew exactly what he did in order to get that kind of result. We politely asked him to retake it. We didn't tell him he screwed up. We didn't tell him we caught him. We just said, oh, there's a glitch in the system. Would you retake it? So, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's no guarantee for success in anything. And it's a combination between fit and what's taking place between their ears. That's why we have the certified life coaches, because these are people that understand how to get inside, in between their ears, and remove blockages. Okay, any more questions before we continue on? It's now, we're an hour and 15 minutes. Do we want to stop or do we want to continue? How's everybody's appetite? Because we've got a lot more information to cover.
How much longer are you looking at here, Craig?
It's up to you. I could talk for days.
I'm okay with block the afternoon.
Yeah, I had blocked. I think you told me 2 to 2 hours or something like that. That's what I blocked out. So
okay.
I got I'll probably go a little longer.
Good. Okay. And if for some reason somebody's got to jump off the call, that's perfectly acceptable. I know Joe and Rick and some of the others might have to jump off, but that's okay. All right. Now we're going to begin the process of connection. And we call it connection marketing secrets and connection selling secrets so that we're able to make that connection, and it's not by pushing the information at the candidate, it's by better understanding them. I love this particular graphic. It's in the books, by the way. It's in my ebooks. Successful sales is all about how well you connect with candidates by understanding how they are individually wired. There is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all. So what we're able to do with the Navigator is customize based on their profile. So now we're going to get into the process of understanding the Navigator profiles and how to make it work. So again, we're identifying skills, we're identifying values, and predictable behavior. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the Merriam-Webster definition of values and behavior, but as it relates to business ownership, we're able to crack the code by going into the four profile combinations. And that's what gives us the indication in terms of how people make decisions as it relates to their value system. So, oh, this got cut off. We've done, I don't even know the count anymore. We've done well over 70,000 assessments in a wide range of industries and business models and job functions. I mean, it's amazing. One thing that we have done, interestingly enough, is there are patterns that occur, and we're able to see the patterns. But more important, what we're able to see is how the profile combinations affect somebody's decision-making process. So if somebody's a high dominant associator, and then say the accomplisher and the contributor, they're going to make decisions based on the value system of the interpersonal relationships. So when they hire people, they're going to hire people that are more fit, family, friends, part of their own little group, compared to the accomplisher who's going to build teams of people based on competencies. So they're going to hire people based on the ability to perform, where the associator is going to hire people based on their ability to fit in with their own particular culture. So we've already done the overview. Now let's start getting into and start drilling each one of these. If you have any questions about the business skills, let me know. It's pretty simple. It also, by the way, gives you insights into a single unit versus a multi-unit franchisee profile. The single unit profile is a sales and marketing because they're feet on the street. The multi-unit is more building, recruiting, building, managing, and motivating teams of people. And the product or the technical skills for multi-unit franchisees doesn't matter. They're not predisposed to hair salons, muffler shops, transmissions, or pancakes. They look at it from the business standpoint. They look at it from the cerebral standpoint, from the brain standpoint. Is this going to help me fulfill my needs? I'll give you a classic example. Potbelly, when they first became a client years ago, it was long before they even started franchising, but they were thinking about franchising. And they had built the company up to about 377 locations. And by the way, it's the same real estate people at Potbelly that were there at Sears Holdings with the hometown stores. Alwyn Lewis, who was the president and CEO of Sears, moved over and became the president and CEO of Potbelly and brought a lot of people with him. Brett, the lawyer, the general counsel, Nancy Turk, the VP of Human Resources, the real estate people, they all came from Sears. So in building that distribution system, they had the real estate metrics nailed. They knew what constituted a good location. So we did the best thing we could do, and that was we had the general managers and the assistant managers take the Navigator, because we knew that the general manager of that particular location is probably pretty close to a single unit franchise profile. And at the time, Alwyn did not want to sell multiple locations. All he wanted was single unit franchisees. So we had every one of their general managers take the Navigator. And we went through the whole process of the data collection and the benchmarking. We created the scorecard, operations training and field support, went through and graded them. Here's what we found. Because knowing the real estate metrics, they still had high-performing, mid-performing, and somewhat poor-performing locations. Here's what we found. We found that the general managers that were in the high-performing locations had much higher influencer scores than those that were mid-performers. What that meant was they had what it takes inside them to get outside the four walls and network with the community, network with the chamber, network with other businesses. They were the ambassador of the brand. So when we turned the faucet on and we started franchising, that's the profile we went after, and sure enough, it made an effect, made a huge difference for them. Now, let's talk about the skills, because each one of the profiles performs the skills very differently. So the accomplisher is good at the sales and marketing, not because they're good at the sales and marketing, but because they will hire talent that is good at the sales and marketing. They're good at the business administration and the HR management. They have the ability, and when they sit in their executive seat, it's a swivel seat, meaning they can deal with a lot of different aspects of the business all at one time. They can deal with the agencies. They can deal with the realtors. They can deal with the managers and all sorts of things. They don't get flustered. And they do well at the product and the technical skills, not because they do it, but because they hire competency. They hire people that are good. Now, let's start looking, because now we're going to make a difference. The influencer is very strong at the sales and marketing, customer service skills. They'll go out of their way. Horrible at the business administration and HR management. One, they're not a good judge of people. Two, they lack the emotional temperament to deal with others. And three, they have a very short attention span, which is a formula for disaster when it comes to running a business that requires heavy business administration and HR management. So when you come across an influencer, and where the influencer is a key aspect of their profile, when it comes to business administration, look for a franchise that provides a lot of the back-end services for the franchisees, because they're not going to do it. They're okay at the product or the technical skills, but here's what we found with the influencers. They're going to get just enough information about the product or whatever, or the service, whatever it is, so they can sell it, not so they can deliver it. The associator is sales adverse, because they don't want to do anything. They don't want to say anything that would potentially alienate others and others from liking them or accepting them. So they'll go out of their way to not sell and not be an influence. They're okay at the business administration and the HR management. The reason we say okay is that the associators cannot handle a large staff. It's a small staff. So for instance, when we created the profile for Mrs. Fields Cookies, we designed it for the associator. They like routine. They're mid-risk takers. They want to hire friends and families. It was perfect. And that's who we grew Mrs. Fields Cookies, or even TCBY with, was the associators. They're real strong at the product or technical skills. So where the influencer has zero attention span, the associator has a deep attention span. And these are the people that are going to drill down. And I always joke with the associators when I come in contact with them, because they read every single page of every single manual. And if the franchisor were to ask them, okay, where would this topic appear in the particular manual, they would point to the exact page, the exact location, because they've drilled down that far into it. It's amazing. The contributor is also sales adverse, because selling's not part of their life. It's not part of their value system. They're good at the business administration, the HR management, because remember, their value system is, what is it I can do to enrich the lives of the people I come in contact with? And they're okay in the product and the technical skills, but okay meaning they're only going to be interested in products that benefit others. They're not going to deal with anything that is superficial. So that's the skills, and that's how each of the profiles performs. And then you'll begin to see as we roll out the training program how this actually materializes. And by the way, each of these profiles, and the idea of creating behavioral sciences is not new. People have been doing it for years. But what we've done is we brought it to the business and to the franchising space. We also, and I alluded to this earlier, when you walk into a restaurant, now that you're beginning to understand the profiles, especially one that's like a TGI Fridays or a Houlihan's, where they've got a bar area, when you walk into that restaurant, watch, because the seating has been designed specifically for the various profiles. So you walk into the bar area, and guess what you find? You find what's called a high top table with a stool. Now, is that designed for the accomplisher? No. The associator? No. The contributor? No. It's the influencer, because they want to be seen. They want to spread their peacock feathers and say, look at me. Then as you get into the dining room, throughout the outer perimeter of the restaurant, you generally have booths. Well, and who are those booths for? The accomplishers? No. Influencers? Absolutely not. They don't want to be hidden. The contributors? Maybe. It's designed for the associators, because they're going to sit there with friends, with family, with their own little group. They don't want to hear from anybody. They want to get served. They want to have their own good time with their own people. And then look at the rest of the dining room, right smack in the middle. And that's where the accomplishers sit, because the accomplishers want an entire 360 view of what's going on. And they're going to time the length of time it takes before they're given served water, before the server comes over, the length of time it takes to get the order in, and they're watching everything. They're watching all of the activity that's taking place. They're taking it all in. Now, each of you have your own profiles. You know what you are. So think about it. Where would you sit inside a restaurant? Okay, the benchmarking is the key, and that's what differentiates the Navigator along with the normative structure. The behavioral mapping process and the ability to delve into those 9 categories is crucial. I can't tell you how many times the VPs of operations from our clients call us to tell us, wow, this is incredible insight that I don't know we would ever have gathered except after years and years and years of working with these people. So now let's get into the profiles. So we've got the accomplisher. Now, but by the way, there is no set order of importance. There is no number one profile, number two, number three, number four. They're all equally as important. The accomplishers are big picture people. They can multitask. They can deal with many different situations at the same time. They're not going to get flustered, but they are very competent, driven, and bottom line focused. And the one thing you want to do is recognize that they've already achieved a certain level of success. So you don't want to give them accolades, but what you do want to do is you want to recognize that they've reached a certain level of success, unless daddy or mommy's given them money. But generally, they've accumulated it themselves. Now what they want to do is leverage what they've achieved. And by the way, we're going to get to a page that has key words to use to communicate with each of the profiles based on their values. And we have clients that print out that one page. And whenever they're talking to somebody, they look at the profile, they look at the page, and they start adjusting the words so that it resonates with that particular profile. Accomplishers are natural leaders. They know how to delegate, and they know how to empower others. They don't want recognition. They don't want the accolades. They are empire builders. Now, also, one of the things, depending upon access to capital, is somebody with a real strong, real high accomplisher score may be a better fit at multi-unit operations than single-unit operations, because they're going to get to the point where they get bored, where they've already maxed out, and now they're ready to do something else, which also includes building a portfolio of different brands. So diversifying and buying into other franchises is something that, remember, we talked about the exit strategy. We talked about they already know where they want to be when they grow up. So just because you make a connection with a particular franchise, always stay in touch with a high dominant accomplisher, because a couple of years down the line, they're going to be ready to start looking at something else. And I would hope that you'd want to be there to show them what that something else is. Smaller percentage of the population, but these are the movers and the shakers. These are the executives. These are the leaders. Their biggest fear, because remember we talked about fears. Fears are so critical, I can't tell you. Because if we ignore it, we're never going to move forward with these candidates. They fear not being part of something that is unique or the best. So when they're looking at brands, they're thinking in their minds. They've got their own yardstick of where they would place that particular brand. Be sensitive to their own yardstick. Okay. So if we look at the accomplisher, at 45%, we found is the desire for accomplishment begins, and self-employment is something they're starting to consider. It's still a little low. So if you've got somebody that comes in, they go through the Navigator, and they're at 50% or below, not ready for prime time yet. But you can be coaching them, because it's not a long period of time before that desire starts to increase. It's only got to go up to 65%. So at that point, it really accelerates, and it becomes very strong. So at 65% to say 85, 86%, that's where they're ready for prime time. They're ready to consider shifting from employment to empowerment. Now at 90%, they're so driven, they're so entrepreneurial, they actually become very difficult to manage. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the clients called me up and with a candidate yesterday that said, I looked at the profile, 92% accomplisher. And he said to me, well, this guy is very driven, so I shared with him exactly how to deal with him, what kinds of questions to ask, which we'll all do with you as we get to that point. But then the client said to me, well, he's got a friend or a family member, I forget what it was, who's got a lot of money. And I said, well, okay, money talks, lots of money screams. And here's what I would caution you. I would caution you that you be very careful in what information you give out. Because if he's so strong as an entrepreneur and he's got money behind him, he could be dangerous, and he could copy your concept and build it on his own and become his own franchisor. Scott said to me, that's what I was thinking. So, it's fact. Just be careful. Okay, what's important to the accomplisher? Now we're starting to drill down into words and messaging. And these are words you should be able to integrate into your presentations and your conversations with accomplishers. Words like success. Now, you can't guarantee success, but you can start asking the accomplisher, how do you define success? What is your yardstick? How are you going to measure success? And, they like challenges. They're not adverse to challenges. And, the odds are with people that score very high as the accomplisher, somebody has said to them in their past, oh, you can't do that. And that's all they needed to hear. That's what ignites that fire that's going to say to them, tell me I can't do it, I'm going to do it. Because they have such a desire to reach that achievement, they'll figure it out. Income absolutely is important to them, but they're going to do it with dignity and respect, where the influencer may forego the dignity and respect in order to play leapfrog. The accomplishers are power-oriented. To them, success, challenges, and achievement is what gives them power. And they're very quality-oriented. They're not somebody that's a high dominant accomplisher does not want to be involved in something that's low quality. They'll do a 180 and go off in a different direction. And again, we keep talking about end results. We keep talking about the fact that they already know what they want to be when they grow up. So we've got to start dealing with that. We've got to start talking to them about, okay, paint a big picture for me. Where do you want to be in 3 years? Where do you want to be in 5 years? And then let's find a business model that's going to accomplish your goals, and one that's unique, and one that's going to give you control and put you in a position to win. That's the kind of tonality and conversation you'd want with an accomplisher. How do you find them? Well, they're always in their offices. I joke around and say that the reason why entrepreneurs work 80 hours a week is so they don't have to work 40 hours a week. They're always in their offices. Or they're going to be on the golf course or a country club. And it's not unusual to hold meetings, in a golf course meeting room or something like that. You'll find them. Airports, they're traveling. Train stations, they're traveling. Through business advisors. Now, this is something that's very interesting because accomplishers have trusted business advisors. And one of the ways in which you can do in your lead generation, if you're looking for an accomplisher, is to go to who their trusted business advisors are. Present a particular brand or present the strategy of what you can do to help somebody into self-employment or to help them find additional brands. Those are the people that you want to communicate with because they're the ones that have the influence on the accomplishers. Medium risk. They're not high risk takers. They're not going to take that blindfolded leap of faith. They're going to make sure that it fits within their parameters of risk. They're going to want something that's steady in terms of growth potential. Real high, sharp bell curves that come down or whatever, not so much. They want something that's going to be steady. And as I mentioned, multi-unit operations or even absentee owners, because they're the ones that are going to be able to hire people as part of their team based on competencies and performance. Area development contracts, they're going to want a large area because they want that kind of control. That's what meets their value system. B2B is something, but remember, and I'm not going to emphasize this anymore, enough, is the exit strategy. Where do you want to be when you grow up? They like things that are growth oriented. The business type is not important. They're not predisposed to hamburgers, hot dogs, mufflers, or Twinkies. They like competition because they feel competition is going to make them better. They also understand that location is critical. So they're going to do everything they can to recruit people that can help them find best locations. And unlike the associator, they can handle a pretty large staff. They can multitask. But one of the things that they're going to be very keen on is how can I dominate the marketplace in this particular space, with this particular brand. They are the empire builders. Very results-driven, hard-working, good delegators and managers. So if you know that's a strength of theirs, talk to them about it. Ask them questions, elicit information. Do you think you're a good delegator? And, how would you handle this particular situation? How would you go about hiring a manager? It's not that you need that information to show them a brand. It's that you need that information so that you're resonating and you're connecting. And because if it's something that's their strength, they're going to want to tell you. And the fact that you appreciate that, that's points on the board for you. They are not ego-driven. They're not egomaniacs. They're not narcissistic. They're success-driven. Good problem solvers. They want efficiency. They're going to hire people to do the details. And again, they hire people based on competencies and skills. Now, what are their concerns? What are their internal concerns? They need lots of control in their life. They need and demand profit and growth. And they expect competency from the company, the franchisor, and the employees. Now, one of the questions you can ask them is, how do you handle an employee that's not performing well? Do you train and retrain? Do you offer them outside third-party training, or do you just let them go? Now, the answer doesn't really matter to you, but the fact you're asking that and you're eliciting from them is a good connector. And, and a lot of times, they're going to end up knowing a lot more about that franchise than the franchisor. They're going to, because they're out there on the streets. They dislike indecision and incompetence. So in your relationship to them, you let them know that when you're ready to show them a particular brand, that you've already gone through your process, your vetting process. They're going to appreciate that. And, they're going to want a franchise that's really more, say, high-tech, low-touch. They don't want a franchisor that's going to be in their face. And they can be somewhat inflexible because they know what they want, they know who they are, and that nothing's going to stop them. And they may want to be inactive in daily operations only because they're going to get bored pretty quickly. So they're going to put somebody in there who can manage that particular business for them. Any questions about the accomplisher? What you will find.
Craig, are you saying that they, I don't know why there's such an echo, but are you saying that they want to have a business where they would be more of an executive or semi-absentee and not an owner-operator?
Yeah.
But what about business coaching and things like that where it's sort of an executive owner-operator?
A little too detail-oriented. Little too detail-oriented. That's really more for the associator contributor, because the business coaching is impact. impact on others, where the accomplisher has their own internal yardstick, and they know when they've been successful based on their own metrics. I'll give you for instance, because you brought it up. It's a good point, and that is when we did Great Clips for Hair. The person that put their franchise together is an accomplisher influencer. Actually, it's probably more influencer accomplisher. And when he put the franchise together, he had all of the buzzwords, all of the instant gratification, gotta have it now messaging. And I don't know if you were around then, but their marketing material for their franchise recruitment was, this is the right concept at the right time, at the right place, geared directly for that influencer, and sold a ton of franchises. And what happened, though, was the influencer would open up the first location, maybe get to the second location, spread their peacock feathers, say, look at me, and crash and burn. When we went through and we created the profile, we wanted a multi-unit operator, high dominant accomplisher, associator, contributor combination. That was who their high performers were. So I created for them marketing material that said, an executive's business decision, smart decisions. And that's what the marketing material was. That's what the website was. That's what turned them on the right path. And as Charlie Simpson said about 8 years ago at a Franchise Update Leadership Conference, the Navigator stopped the bleeding. So, yeah, so they're the empire builders, not necessarily the doers. They're not the worker bees. Make sense?
Who are they going to look for?
Thank you.
Who are they going to look for if they're the area developer? Who are they going to look for their single unit franchisees that are going to be in their areas? What type of profile will they be looking for?
I'm sorry. Say that again.
If they have an area, if they're an area developer and they're bringing in single units into their area, what kind of profile will they be looking for those individuals that be working in their areas or having franchise in their areas?
Okay, great question. It's not what they think is the right profile. If they know that that particular franchisor has created a franchisee profile, they will follow it to a T.
Okay.
Yeah. So the area.
So they are good at following what works.
Oh yeah. Unless they're up around the high 80s, 89, 90, into the 90s, then they're going to change it. Then they're going to monkey with it. Yep.
Yeah, they're going to go after it, the next shiny object. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. Alex Roberts, who used to be president of Mr. Handyman, called me a few years ago. And he said, I've got 2 candidates for the same market. I said, okay. He said, would you pull up the profiles for both of them? So I did. And the profile of the person that really should have been that franchisee, I identified. And he says, darn, that person has no money. I said, well, help them find, access to capital. He said, well, what about the other profile? I said, Alex, this person's way too entrepreneurial. I said, I'll show you. When are you having your next discussion with this guy? He says to me, tonight in about an hour and a half. I'm having dinner with him. I said, great. Here's your opportunity to see exactly how this works. I said, when you're at dinner, and after the salutations and the wine's poured or whatever it might be, lean forward in your seat towards the person and paint the picture of the business model for Mr. Handyman. And when you're done, take a deep breath and go back in your chair, take another deep breath and say, okay, now that you've seen what we are, what would you do differently? And I said, Alex, let's find out, because this guy's going to tell you. He said, okay, I'm going to do it. Calls me the next morning. He said, you were right. I said, which part? He said, I did exactly what you said. I leaned forward, I presented the business model, I took a deep breath, I leaned back, I took another deep breath and asked this guy what he would do differently. He talked for 45 minutes about how he would change this, he would change that, and do this, that. So, yeah, they're going to do it. So I can't tell you the number of times that's happened over the years, but it's hysterical because that's the kind of experiences with the profiling that really resonates, and you'll see. Anytime you're talking to a high accomplisher at around 90%, they don't want to follow rules. They want to make up the rules. Now, I will be perfectly honest with you. I've sat in every chair around the conference table. I've been a president and CEO a number of times. I was involved in operations and marketing and the one seat I've never sat in, I've never been a franchisee. And I wouldn't want me as a franchisee. I'm a 92% accomplisher. And it's not that I'm not obedient, because that's not the issue. It's I'm always looking at ways in which I can improve and enhance and do this more effectively and whatever. I wouldn't want me as a franchisee. Great. Okay. Why don't we do this? Why don't we take a break at the accomplisher? And then let me know, because we're into this now for 2 hours, and I know that once you're at the 2-hour point, it becomes tiresome. And as we go through the remaining 3, and then we get into the profile combinations, I'd like you at the top of your game. So in terms of flexibility for this week, we're pretty close. I'm pretty open. So let me know, and I'll coordinate the next part so that it fits your schedules. And the next step would be completing the profiles, beginning to look at the profile combinations. At that point, I'm going to start distributing to you the workbooks and the audios and the videos of the profiles. And then we're going to go back and we're going to go through them, and then we'll go forward. So by the time we're done with the next session, you should have a pretty good idea as to the profiles. Then the next step after that is, how do we make this work? How do we make more money by being responsive to their needs and establishing a deeper connection with them? So on that note, any additional questions?
Just in logistics, how much time should we allow for the next session, Craig? A couple hours or?
Yeah, I would plan a good 2 hours.
Okay.
Now, that's going to take us over the anticipated 3 hours, but that's okay. I'd rather spend time so that you're getting it as opposed to rushing through it.
Okay.
Craig,
do you want us to email your when we have time for a couple hours this week yet?
Please do.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
Lori?
I just thought while we had everyone on the top, I think it's easier just to look at your calendars right now, because I know that with the consultation got scheduled, the only time available right now is between 1 and 4 on Friday, because everything else is booked in 2-hour blocks.
All right, let me pull up. Okay, so this would be what time?
On the 17th at 1 o'clock, I have a 2-hour block because I've got so many appointments this week.
So you're open at that time?
Yes. Is anyone else open at that time, or what do we do if I can't?
Jim?
I'm not open. No, I've got a 11:30 to 2:30 that day.
Okay, both of you are East Coast time.
Right. I've got a block that day. I could do it from 2:30 to 4, hour and a half on the 17th.
Jim, how about you?
Yeah, I could cut out. I could do it 2:30 to 4.
Okay. then I'm going to go ahead. I'll send out. Actually, I don't need to send out the invite again. It's the same login. So we'll plan on convening at 2:30 your time, which is 12:30 my time here in Arizona.
And I thank you, gentlemen, for looking at your calendars. Book something during that time so that works.
Sure. Perfect. Great.
Okay.
Okay. In the meantime, if anybody has any questions, don't hesitate. The one thing you'll see is, I'm always available. That's the good news. The bad news is I'm always available.
Okay. Thanks, Greg.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.